Texas A&M might have the best rushing attack in the SEC, but can they lead the SEC in rushing?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I am your host, Matt Galatzan of Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today, I am joined by my good buddy, Harrison Reno. We are coming to you on a Thursday. Harrison, I'm really confident about this Texas A&M running game. They come into this year, and it's one of those where, you return. It's not very often that you're able to return your three top rushers from a season ago. Not often that you're able to return, a guy like Le'Veon Moss, who seemed like a Heisman Trophy candidate at one point last year before he went down with an injury. So there's a lot to be excited about with this Texas A&M running game. So what the discussion that I'd like to pose to you today for our first segment is, can Texas A&M lead the SEC in rushing? A good buddy of ours, Brooks Austin, of the Film Guide Network, kind of brought this question up the other day, so I wanted to riff on it a little bit with you. I think that it's a very possible thing. I think that, with the depth and talent of this room, I don't think that it's too far-fetched to say that it's a possibility, at least.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a possibility. I mean, when you bring back a Le'Veon Moss, when you bring back a Reuben Owens, and then you add into the fold a mobile quarterback in Marcel Reed, who you're going to want to allow to run the ball, a few times a game, whether that's design runs or scrambles, I definitely think it's a real possibility. And, as we've talked about several times, yes, this offense is probably going to look a little bit different in terms of the passing game. They're probably going to do some things a little bit differently, maybe not be as heavily RPO based. And that's just because you're going to have a more experienced Marcel Reed. But one thing that's going to stay the same, we expect to stay the same, Matt, is going to be they're going to be a run-first football team, I expect. And considering last year where the passing game kind of struggled throughout the year, A&M still finished second in the SEC in rushing, only behind Tennessee last year in actual total yardage on the ground. Which it might surprise some folks with the way that Tennessee offense is designed. But I for one, would not be shocked if Texas A&M is at the very least number 2 again in the SEC in rushing.
Well, I think that they were. I mean, I'm right there with you. I think that they were well on their way to leading the SEC in rushing before Le'Veon Moss got hurt.
Yeah.
I think that, if. And I get you had to start Connor Wegman last year. It was kind of his team at the beginning of the year, and that kind of shifted things a little bit, like based on how they could approach the ground game. But once Marcel Reed came in, it just seemed like they were running the football all over the place. And you get back a healthy Le'Veon Moss, who last year, before his injury, 121 carries for 765 yards and 10 touchdowns. In 9 games, and you kind of, it's really in 8 games because he got injured pretty early on in that South Carolina game. And if you kind of extrapolate those stats to the SEC's leading rushers last season in terms of where he was 8th in the SEC in rushing, he didn't play the last 3 games. So it really, like I said, the last 4 games. So you get him back. You get a Reuben Owens healthy, who was not healthy for most of the season last year. He was dealing with that foot thing that he had all year last year. I mean, that's a 5-star talent. That's one of the best, one of the most explosive talents on this roster, especially, not just from the running back position, from a skill position in general. Amari Daniels is back as kind of the third guy, kind of a change of pace guy. And then you add Marcel Reed's legs into the equation, and it just seems like they're going to be able to attack you in so many different ways in this running game and make you really guess where they're going to come from. Oh, and let's not forget about Terry Bussey's probably going to be involved in the run game as well. You can get KC Concepcion involved in the run game as well. So if you can throw all those weapons into it, the way that Colin Klein calls this offense, the RPO based stuff, it could come from anywhere at any time. And it's one of those rushing attacks where, and we'll get into this other part about it in a minute that makes me so confident, but it's just one of those rushing attacks where just based on the skill position players alone and the running backs, you're really just going to have a hard time slowing these guys down in general.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me pause is, and I think this is becoming a trend over the last few years in the SEC and across college football as a whole, is these coaches start to look at when you talk about the athletes Texas A&M has. They got a lot of athletes that you're going to get in space. I know it's cliche, and everyone talks about getting your best athletes in space. The only thing that gives me somewhat of a pause, Matt, is with all these athletes who are best, obviously, like you said, in space, the screen game. And I know a lot of coaches look at the screen game as an extension of the run game. I think that's been a buzzword, extension of the run game the last few years. That would be the only thing that kind of gives me pause in terms of that could be, you could have 400 some yards just off the screen game that takes away your traditional run game numbers would be my only pause about this. Because I do think this still is going to be a run first offense. I don't think you can go out here and just go full true air raid with Marcel Reed because you're going to want to account for his legs in your offense. But yeah, I think it's a very, very realistic expectation that this team's near the top of the conference in rushing.
Yeah, and my final point here about why I think this is possible is pretty simple at the end of the day. And this offensive line is mean, it's nasty, it's experienced, it gets after you in the running game, and they returned their top 6 players from the line a year ago. They have the best interior of offensive linemen in the country, arguably in Armajé Reed Adams. These tackles know what they're doing in the running game. On the other side, this whole offensive line is just built to be mean and nasty and get a push up front. And I think that, you pair the talent that they have at running back, you pair the running talent that you have in Marcel Reed and all these other players that can get involved in the run game with that offensive line that is so mean and so nasty and so experienced, might be the best offensive line in the SEC, maybe in the country. I just think there's very little reason to believe that this can't be the best running football team in the SEC.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, just bringing back the offensive line, all 5 of them. I mean, it's really rare. I don't know how many other teams in the nation return their starting offensive line. And I mean, not just that, but you're talking about these are all SEC players. These are, potential All-American offensive linemen. There's at least 2 of them that could probably have a good chance at making the first, an All-American team by the year's end. So I think the outlook's definitely looking good for the A&M rushing game. And I mean, I think both of us can say, I don't think it's the run game that is concerning for us at all. I think what's really going to determine A&M season will be just how much success they can find in the passing game. But and I think that's just going to be because they're going to have to build off their run game.
Yeah, agreed. And just a quick projection from you before we move on to our next segment. If A&M doesn't lead the SEC in rushing, who is a team that you believe could kind of take that mantle? For me, I think it's got to be Tennessee, just because of what they did last year. I know that they're replacing Dylan Sampson, but I think Tennessee's got to be up there. I think Alabama is going to be up there with Jam Miller. Texas is probably a dark horse now that they return CJ Baxter, but it's really hard to see another team that can reach the level of rushing this season as opposed to A&M.
Yeah, I think Tennessee might be the favorite if it's not A&M, just because the way their offense is, they want to create light boxes, create favorable run fronts, and they run it a lot. They just move at a really fast pace, and they make it really difficult for defenses to defend, make you defend every inch of the field. I think, like you said, it's probably going to be them if it's not A&M, just because how often they do it and the ways they put defenses in conflict. But like you said, I agree. Texas, Alabama. Another shout would be South Carolina. I just don't know what South Carolina's offensive line looks like in terms of are they going to be able to get that constant push? But when you have Lenore Sellers at quarterback, that probably cancels out some of the questions or concerns you have with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's change gears here real quick. We're gonna go into our break, and then when we come back, we're gonna talk about Colin Klein, the Texas A&M offensive coordinator. He met with the media yesterday, as well as a couple of the new transfers met with the media yesterday. So stick with us, and we'll be right back after this break. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have a full picture, you can end up leaving the money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all the accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Do you have subscriptions that you forgot that you were paying for? I linked all of my accounts to Monarch Money and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those alone saved me money every single month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off the first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKDOWNCollege. All right, Harrison, we are back and we are going to talk a little bit about Colin Klein and what he had to say to the media yesterday. A lot of good stuff out of Coach Klein. It was it was him that met with the media and a couple of the transfers. But we were coming off of practice yesterday. Things look good as usual for Texas A&M during that practice. A lot of exciting stuff. And there's a couple of things that he said that I kind of wanted to point out and get your opinions on here for us to discuss. And one of the one particularly exciting thing that I think that he talked about a lot was the explosive nature this offense has had lately in training camp. One of the things last year that I think this offense could have used a little bit more of was just outside of using Marcel Reed's legs and especially after Le'Veon Moss went down, is we need more explosive plays in this offense. We need more um, just explosive plays downfield and to kind of uh, set the tone in some of these football games and give our offense a better chance to succeed. And so far, it seems like they're doing a pretty good job at creating those explosives so far in camp. He said we had talking about the scrimmage over the weekend. He said we had more explosive plays in that scrimmage that we have had since we have been here. They were getting excited with each other, watching each other make big explosive plays, and that is something that you really love to hear it. You really love to hear it, Harrison, because that's something this offense desperately needs.
Yeah, and I think it's something you were almost expecting at this point, at least to see an increase in it from them because they ranked what 88th, tied for 88th in the nation in 20-yard or in passing plays 20 yards or more last year. And it's, I mean, you go look at some of the past national champions. What do they all have in common? They can create explosive plays through the air and on the ground. And honestly, I think it was kind of an expectation. Like you wanted to hear that coming out of the first few scrimmages from A&M that they were creating more explosive plays. Obviously, maybe not quite expecting, hey, it's more than we've had since we've been here as a staff. But yeah, I think it's definitely a great sign. Maybe I don't know what the fans would think in terms of like what it means for their defense. Maybe defensively you don't want to hear that as much, considering they
Mhm.
give up explosives last year at the end of last year in major ways. But just in terms of the guys they brought in, I mean, you talk about Casey Concepcion, talk about Mario Craver. Like those are two guys that could create explosives. I mean, Mike Elko talked about with Concepcion himself that when he faced him as a freshman, that was something they were concerned about and something he saw out of him. So I'm definitely excited to see what this offense looks like. And then you add in the returners and Terry Bussey, Isaiah Williams, Bethel Roman. It's they got some guys. They got depth at those positions more so than they did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin Klein, he also talked about why he believes that this skill group is more explosive than they were last year. And he said it's two things. Number one, it's physical speed, their ability to truly run and stretch the defense and make man coverage strain. That's a big deal. But then I think on the other side too, they're just more familiar with the offense. And the moves that they made in the transfer portal, you touched on it a bit with Mario Craver and Concepcion and all those guys. They really focused on speed and explosiveness at the wide receiver position. And as good as Noah Thomas was last year, he's at Georgia now, but as good as Noah Thomas was last year, he was not the most explosive guy downfield. He's a red zone threat. He's a possession guy, just a big body. They didn't have that true downfield threat last season that could really stretch a defense. Now you got what, maybe three guys who could do it, at least two with Concepcion and Mario Craver. Now you add, Terry Bussey could be a part of that mix as well. Jonah Wilson is another guy that I think people are kind of underrating. I think he's probably more of the Noah Thomas type than the explosive guy. But then you talk about Jerome Miles, who is just one of the most physically gifted athletes on this football team. I mean, there's a lot of guys who could stretch that defense, and that's going to be huge, not just for making those explosive downfield plays, but also for the running game, because now the defense has to honor that downfield threat with all these guys, and it opens things up for a Le'Veon Moss and a Marcel Reed and Reuben Owens and all those guys. So it's just a great wrinkle to add to that offense that they didn't have last year.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for me in terms of these receivers will be, I mean, specifically for Craver, it's my question will be like, is Craver going to develop into that out and out receiver that they're looking him to be? My only concern would be that maybe he turns into a gadget guy for him, more of a gadget type role, where they just bring him in for every couple of plays and ask him go run, the go route. But if he turns into a full-time receiver and somebody who can learn the route tree and run all those different routes, then I think for me that's one of my biggest questions, because you have a guy that has proven himself in Casey Concepcion. Jonah Wilson is another guy that has experience. Terry Bussey is now full-time on offense. They really, really do need a guy that they can trust, downfield consistently to be there. And Craver, I mean, showed with his speed last year and his limited chances with Mississippi State that he can get over the top of the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that that's super important. And Mario Craver, I think, is going to have a bigger year than a lot of people are counting on him for, because as a freshman at Mississippi State, he was kind of um, a boutique player in some sense. He was really focused on making explosive plays, and he didn't get a whole lot of opportunities. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunities here with Texas A&M to do exactly what he excels at and be a more focused part of this offense, as opposed to what he was at Mississippi State, where he just had a couple catches a game. But Colin Klein also said something, that really caught my eye. This is about Marcel Reed. And I think it's also a very important aspect of what, one of the things that you really wanted to see out of Marcel Reed coming into this season. And that's his ability to, build chemistry and take with these wide receivers and kind of take a step forward in this offense and be more comfortable. And here's what Klein had to say. He said he's really getting comfortable in building some continuity with some of our wideouts and skill players. You can tell when you watch and pause the tape, when he makes the decision to throw, when that trigger is pulled, to be able to see what the picture is when he is seeing it. I think the level of anticipation on some of those throws is getting better and improving with that trust and continuity, which is good to see. I think that's huge, Harrison, that he's like, because last season it was very much a, one read RPO, simple thing that he didn't have to make a lot of choices in reading the defense and going through his progressions. They kept it very simple for him because they did not expect him to be put into that position as early as he was. The fact that he's really starting to take those steps forward in his progressions and being able to read those defenses and make the right decisions and where he's going with the football. If that becomes a consistent thing, he could have a really, really huge year for A&M.
Yeah, and it's something in terms of talking about Marcel Reed at the next level. Anticipation is something you want to hear. Like, he is anticipating windows, he's anticipating throws, being on time, in a rhythm. Sometimes, hey, there's some throws you got to be early to it. If you don't release that ball early, you're going to be late, and that's the difference between a completion and a big play, or sometimes it's the difference between an interception if you're not early to it. So I think that's huge. I mean, and people have talked about all offseason. How much better is Marcel Reed going to be as a passer? Can he unlock the passing game for this Aggies offense? And it seems so far that from what Colin Klein just said, that they're seeing that growth from him, and they're seeing it at a level where they're going to be able to go out there and trust him to go make the right play and to give him a little bit more responsibility in terms of being in the pocket and actually going through progressions. Because, as great as it is, and you can create explosive with your RPO game, actually being able to read the field and being able to, go from 1 to 2 to 3, ball out, like that's what it takes to win sometimes. And I think you saw like you said, the simplicity of the offense at times for A&M kind of got the better of them. Like in the Texas game, they struggled to create consistently downfield versus that team. You're going to have to go through multiple reads and being able to create off script a little bit. And that's something that I think Marcel Reed's going to be able to unlock, is when things don't go right and he's out of structure. That's where he should thrive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And another one that we have here quickly from Colin Klein before we move on to our next segment is his praise for Terry Bussey. And this is a guy that I think is going to be critical to what Texas A&M does offensively this year, just because he's such a versatile playmaker on offense. He can be involved in the running game, the passing game, uh, whether it's jet sweeps or just sitting there as a running back. It doesn't really matter. This guy needs to get involved. He needs to get the ball in his hands. And Colin Klein said of Terry Bussey, Terry's done a really nice job. He's always had great twitch. He's always had really good top end speed. And I think the strides he's made is the definition of routes, in and out cuts and breaks. And I think that that's very, very important, just because you want this guy to be as polished as he can possibly be as a wide receiver, whether, making those cuts and getting in and out of breaks and all that stuff, because they're moving him pretty much full time to wide receiver. He needs to learn that position, and you need to get the ball in his hands as often as possible. But what he really said that caught my eye was Bussey's football IQ is off the charts. I mean, he's able to process a lot of what's going on around him, and I've really been impressed for the first part of camp here. He's made some really good contested catches, tight coverage on defense, good ball, and he's big and strong and goes up and attacks the football. So from a wide receiver skill set, he's made some really good strides. And I love to hear that, because this guy could be Texas A&M's best offensive player by the end of the season if he kind of hits every level.
Yeah, I think what we talked about a few weeks ago in terms of Terry Bussey and his role in this offense, they're converting him to a full-time receiver. They're not going to worry about him playing both ways. But I just still want to see him be a creative outlet for this offense for Colin Klein. I've seen Colin Klein do it, get creative with other guys in his past. I want to see it with Terry Bussey. I mean, line him up everywhere. He's the one guy you can put everywhere. When you listen to Mike Elko talk about Concepcion and what he saw of him as a freshman at NC State, it was that job description he gave Concepcion is kind of what you hope to hear about Terry Bussey heading into year 2. Just be a creative outlet, somebody who you can depend on as an explosive play guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to change gears here real quick, take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about just a couple brief things that the transfers had to say that we enjoyed during the media availability last year. But stick with us, and we will be right back. All right, Harrison, we just got a couple minutes left here, so let's close out the show with just a couple interesting quotes that I found from the new transfers that came in. The first one is just Nate Boerichter, one of the new tight ends on the team, new tight end transfer. He praised Marcel Reed. He just said he is so good. He's as dual threat as it gets. One thing I love is when he scrambles out of the pocket, which happens often. He keeps his eyes on the field. Being able to use your scramble rules to your advantage and make a play is an option. And it's good to hear that he's able to kind of, like last year, one of his issues, I think, was once he got out of the pocket, he kind of lost the plot a little bit, and he just kind of focused on running downfield. And there was a few times he made a good play in the passing game while he was scrambling out. But it sounds like he's kind of focused a lot more on that this season, which is a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, there's always those opportunities where you make a good play, but then you go back and you watch it like, oh, here's a great play, and I think that's probably just where that comes from in terms of his adjustment. It's he probably saw a few times last year where he left some yards on the field, and this is just another thing that has come with time and more reps. Like I think A&M's going to be so much better off in the sense that they gave Marcel Reed that time to go play last year because now this year's less going to be about learning how things go and more so expecting, already knowing what happens and where to go with football.
Yeah, and I think that this is the other thing that we're gonna do. We're gonna hit on real quick before we close out here is just a little bit more of a fun thing that I think these kids talked about. And that's just they're new transfers. They haven't been to Kyle Field before, and they're just excited to see the experience and kind of really take it in because it is one of the best in college football, if not the best. And Tony Onyedem, I always butcher that last name. I apologize. He said, I've heard good things. Like even the freshmen that came on visits used to tell me, like, bro, are you ready for this? Like Cal Field is crazy. I, I'm ready for sure. I'll be at home. I'm at home chilling, so I'm gonna go on YouTube and look up the best games and see how the environment is. I'm so excited. And then Bo Richter said, I've heard it's ridiculous. I've heard the fan base is wild. I'm very excited. It doesn't matter what the game is. They're going to show out. I'm pretty pumped about that. And it's just a fun thing. Like, you know, uh, getting your first experience at Kyle Field is one of the coolest experiences you could probably get as a college football player. And I just love that they're so excited about it. And I love that Onyedem's gonna go home and watch all the best moments on YouTube. It just sounds like fun.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like every fan out there. I mean, heck, even us. I'm sure there's be times where because I know I do it. We'll go back and watch highlights from old games. Whether it's just teams we care about or just all around college football. Go look at those best moments. I don't know a day where there's an Instagram reel that pops up my feed about a college football moment, whether it's a team I follow closely or not, that I don't stop and just watch just to absorb the electricity of that play or that moment. I mean, I can think of several. Just I was watching the other day, Auburn, Oregon, 2021, 22. There was a nice high energy call from one of their touchdown plays, and I stopped and watched it. Just college football so close. So I don't doubt that. I mean, yeah, Kyle Field's definitely one of the more unique places in college football.
Yeah, and they certainly have one of the coolest intros in college football, like coming out onto the field. I know Kanye is not exactly everybody's favorite person in the world right now, but the Aggies coming out to power and the way that the fans get involved in that and all that stuff. That's just going to be such a cool experience for everyone involved. So I'm just excited to be back at Kyle Field this season for a few games and for the start of college football. And I'm glad that these guys are going to get to experience that for the first time, and the freshmen too. They're going to have a hell of a time. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, please check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Show on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please do not forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast. Give me a follow over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI and on X at Matt Galatzan. And you can follow Harrison on X at Harrison Reno. And we will see you next time.